Okay, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and this is Laguna Hills Nursery, and today's class is avocados, and we have a good crowd today. So I think we're getting more chairs out right now, so we'll see what we can do. Okay, so avocado trees. Certainly, this part of Orange County, in fact, the hills behind us, there's still a lot of avocado orchards there. This is the avocado belt of California, so all the foothills in Orange County are considered the avocado belt. Generally, you can grow them on flat ground just fine too. In fact, this property used to be, I was told, an avocado orchard right here. So the requirements for avocados, they don't like frost. Now, we haven't gotten that cold, enough cold to hurt avocados since 1990. So if you're, what's that, 30 years ago? If you're 30 years or older, you were here when, and you were here in December of 1990, this is like December 23rd and 24th, we hit 23 degrees. And that was enough to damage, severely damage just about any avocado tree. Didn't kill trunks so much, but some of the younger trees died that year. We just lost them. It was so cold for 2 days in a row. I remember we had puddles in our nursery, and the ice was about an inch thick. So it was quite cold a couple days in a row. But that's about it. We haven't approached those temperatures since. So we're pretty safe throughout Orange County unless you live in a canyon back in the canyons or by Santa Ana River. Sometimes that gets pretty cold too. Now avocados certainly have become very popular to grow. Unfortunately, most people have a bad experience growing them, and that's only because the suppliers who supply most of the avocados for retail, their trees die. So they've made avocados more difficult in people's minds than they should be, because avocados are pretty much as easy as any other plant to grow, as long as you don't put them in the wrong soil. So the problem we're having is that retail trees, I know one company puts their trees in about 75% sawdust. So if you think about that, and the other company puts them maybe 40 to 50% wood chips. And when you think about that, that means that those plants are trying to grow in a dead tree. And ground up wood and materials like that are better for growing mushrooms than they are for growing plants. So if you have soil that looks like this is perfect soil for avocados. So this is sandy loam. Usually it's found where rivers flow through. Generally the soil between the foothills here and the 5 freeway pretty much looks like this. Very sandy soil, you can dig forever. We've seen tractors going 10 foot down, you still have the same thing. So that's very nice soil. As you get toward the 405, it becomes pretty clay-like. The foothills here are a mixture of sand and clay. They call it sandy clay. So now they don't like to sit in water for very long. So avocados have a reputation of, you go to most nurseries, they tell you, don't water this too often. Now avocados come from the West Indies, Guatemala, southern Mexico, rainforest area. They like it wet. But because most avocados are grown in ground up trees, you have to keep them very dry or marginally too dry to keep them from rotting, because that soil, that ground up wood wants to rot, and it wants to rot real badly because it is dead and it's sitting there. If it's in soil like this, it's very difficult to rot it. If your avocado's in soil that doesn't have anything dead in there, there's nothing here that promotes the rot. Now the thing about orchards, they want to make sure that you have avocado trees that don't sit in puddles for too long. So the problem with that is the roots on avocado trees have to breathe to stay healthy. So, the tops of plants in general make oxygen. The roots need to breathe oxygen, but they don't really have a way to get the oxygen from the leaves down to the roots. It just goes out into the air through the pores in the leaves, goes through the soil. The roots can breathe. If they can't breathe, the oxygen levels drop very low. That's when you get root rot. And it's not particularly a drainage issue. If your soil is very sandy and stays real wet, it can still, the oxygen is still in the ground even though it's still real wet. If you have clay, unfortunately the water circulates very slowly through clay and the oxygen may be depleted, say a foot deep where the roots are, because the water can't circulate and get the oxygen down there. Now, you know, they tell you avocados require good draining soil. Well, almost everybody's grown an avocado pit in a glass of water, and there's no drainage in that glass, but it can, you know, I've seen avocados in those glasses of water for a couple years, because as long as the water's clean and it's free to circulate in the glass, there's plenty of oxygen in the water. And what we mean by that, it's got to be around 7, I would think on avocados, 7 parts per million. So out of every million molecules of water, you've got at least 7 parts per million of 7 molecules of oxygen. And when it drops too low, it's dropping below 5 parts per million. So they don't need a whole lot, but they need some. Our tap water, generally, the water districts make sure that you have 5 to 7 parts per million in the tap water as it comes out of the faucet. So sometimes in Santa Ana, the water looks pretty milky because they put a lot of air bubbles in there. Those are air bubbles. So, okay. So they need good drainage. They need ample water. So you want to keep the soil moist throughout the root system pretty much all year. The root system on most plants is about a foot deep in the cities, maybe a foot and a half if you got really nice soil. So the only way you can check that, I mean, there's no moisture meters that are sold retail that are deep enough to check. So if you just get a piece of rebar, even a wood stake is fine. You know, finger thick is good. If you can push in the ground a foot and a half deep, like your avocado tree, it's wet that deep. If the soil is too dry for an avocado root to pick up water, you can't push a stick through it. So you want about a foot to foot and a half of moisture or penetration with an object. So check that. I mean, farmers, that's how they used to check moisture, walk around with a piece of rebar, push it in where they're watering their avocado trees. If they can push it in well over a foot deep, they're good. If you can push it down 3 feet, you know, you're wasting water. The tree roots will not get that out of there. So if you don't put, you know, make sure you don't put compost around. So most planter mixes are compost. If you put in a pot, do not put any potting soil that contains compost. There's very few potting soils out there that are not made out of compost. Recycled wood products, whatever you want to call a ground up dead tree. So be careful. Those will kill the avocado trees because they decompose too fast. And as they decompose, they consume the oxygen and the roots suffocate and they get root rot. It has very little to do with water. In our containers here, we grow our plants in our top pot potting soil, which looks like this. It's actually sand, volcanic rock, sponge rock, peat moss, and charcoal. And pretty much we can water these once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. They wouldn't rot. There's the peat moss, even though it's something that died, it died thousands and thousands of years ago. It's been sitting at the bottom of the lake for that length of time. It doesn't consume much oxygen. It does a little bit, but we haven't seen avocados ever rot in this mixture. So that's what we grow the avocados we grow are in that mix. Now you want a good amount of sun on them. Size-wise, most of the varieties that we sell are heavy producers, and most of the heavy producers grow about 10, 12 foot by about the same width. The University of California used to promote some varieties as dwarf, as genetically dwarf. Then they got suspicious on them. So what they did is they took the Gwen avocados they had, cut off all the flowers for 5 years so they wouldn't fruit, and the trees broke 20 feet. If they're fruiting, they don't break 10. So apparently the trees that stay small are staying small because of production. You have an avocado at the end of a stem, that stem doesn't grow. So as long as they're producing heavily, they're staying small for the time being. If they're not allowed to fruit, and there's some varieties that are just lousy producers. So like they say, the regular Hass avocado at the supermarket, you get one good crop out of every 3 years. So 2 out of 3 years it's growing 3 feet a year, 1 year it doesn't grow. So that's the problem that we have with some of the lighter producing varieties, is that they're growing 2 to 3 foot a year. So unless you're cutting that off, they eventually get up, 15, 20 foot, too high to reach. So in that case, just keep pruning. Now in the old days, what they used to do is let avocado trees grow 20 by 20, 25 foot, way too high to pick, and they would just stump them. They get the chainsaw out, cut it down to a 4-foot stump. It would sit there and not grow for 3 or 4 months, and then it would take off and get back to about 8 by 8 by the end of that year, and it would flower and fruit the next year. So you can do that, but nowadays they don't want to miss that 1 year where they cut it back. So I've talked to some of the managers, they said they cut them every winter. They cut them down, to below 10 feet, below 12 foot. Most of the varieties that are being grown commercially are Hass or Hass relatives. So, but we carry quite a few different kinds, and we'll go over that in shortly. So,
if the Hass is seemingly the most popular of the varieties, why doesn't it fruit as often as a different variety would?
We'll talk about that too. So in general, I used to tell people, don't grow avocados in containers. They won't fruit well enough until a friend of mine had an avocado in a 24-inch box, and I was there counting, and I'm going, there's 80 avocados in this tree. So now I don't tell people don't plant them in containers, because apparently you can do pretty well with them in a pot. Now, what they found in all of farming is that the ideal size of a fruit tree in an orchard is 5 foot wide, maybe 7 foot tall. So much smaller than they used to grow them. So they used to grow trees, allow them to grow 20 foot by 20 foot or 15 by 15. But what they're finding is that the foliage on most fruit trees is so dense, light doesn't penetrate more than 2.5 foot. So you have the inside of your tree with no fruit, because the light never reaches in. I mean, you can do things like cut out portions of it to let light let in portions, but still, what they're finding is that fruit trees are most productive when they're only 5 foot wide. So you can do that by pruning them. Just keep pruning them to a dome shape. I would say, again, a lot of these varieties that we're selling are pretty stable at about 8 to 12 foot. And still, you'll get plenty of fruit on that, so you may not need to prune them at all. But if you want to keep them smaller, there is a good reason for that. You'll get more fruit per square foot in your garden than you would if you allowed it to grow bigger than that. So that's why my friend's tree in a 24-inch box, it was about 5 foot wide and about 5 foot tall, not including the box, and it was just absolutely loaded. So now we've seen. We planted a tree at the demonstration garden at the Great Park in Irvine, and about 4 years ago, my wife and I were there counting fruit on, maybe 5 years ago, and one branch at the bottom had 50 avocados lined up on it. We're going, okay, that's a lot of fruit. So they can put out quite a bit of fruit, and we'll talk about how to make them fruit better in just a second here. So when you plant avocados, if your soil is really well drained, very sandy like this, what they say to do on a lot of textbooks I have is dig a hole as big enough if you want to get your tree in there, which is about 1 foot deep, about 1 foot wide, fill with water, and if it drains out within 10 or 15 minutes, you're fine. Even if it takes half a day, you're still pretty good. If it stays a little pond there for a couple days, you got to do something. So at my last house I lived at, we had we're at the edge of on a side of a hill, and this was a house built. The land was developed in the 80s, so they knew how to prevent landslides, because a lot of the hills around this area do slide when it gets too wet. So in fact, good friend of mine was the geologist who told them how to fix that slope. So he said, don't try to dig your yard. It's 2 foot of solid clay over sand. And we tried digging in it. Yeah, the shovels just bounce off this stuff. We know they packed it in really good. So all we did is we built up on it to grow our avocado trees there. Although what I had, my yard was, I had a 10-foot drop off behind it. We did put an avocado tree right at the edge of the drop off within 3 foot of it, and that tree did fine. It didn't have any issues, even though it was solid clay here, right at the edge of a drop off. The water gets pulled down the slope. The excess water gets pulled down. But we had another tree about 20 foot in. So what we did with that, since we couldn't dig much of a hole, we didn't. We brought in 2 pickup loads of this type of soil, the sandy loam stuff, which is this, it's got a little bit of clay, but it's mostly sand, and made a little hill out of it. It was about 8 foot wide, 18 inches tall. So pretty much the entire root system of the plant was sitting above ground level. Water would be, if it rains a lot, the water goes down to this level here. So most of the root system was above ground. That was 2 cubic yards of soil. That's a lot of dirt for the tree to live in. That tree grew like 6 foot in 3 months when we had it in there. So it did quite well on that. And that's actually a big enough mound. You can probably plant more than one in there if you wanted to. And the recommendations by our supplier is at least 3 foot wide, 18 inches high if you've got clay soil. And you can use the clay. I mean, if you mound up clay above grade, above the soil level, it will drain down to it. It's like sponge. It'll just get sucked down to the soil level. So even if you just use your native clay soil, if you mount it up, you're in good shape.
While the tree is growing, is it ever a good idea to rotate or mix in some of the loam and just kind of rotate soil around? That way it's really a dead issue.
Well, once you have a tree planted and you start messing with the dirt, you're cutting through the roots, and that's not good. So just leave it alone. Once it's in there, leave it alone. I mean, there are plenty of avocado trees growing in clay soil. That's not, again, the sandy clay of these hills, that's where most avocados in Orange County are being grown right now. They're in that clay soil, but it's well-drained clay. So they seem to like that, so you're fine. And I have a friend who has an orchard in near Foothill High School. Yeah, I mean, when it rains, you get blocks of clay that, when they're digging trenches and that after rains, you just get blocks this big of solid clay. And their avocado trees are pretty much on flat ground, although not the lowest part of that orchard. The orchard may have a 1 or 2% slope, and it's clay, and those trees look fine. So it's not critical that you have great drainage. Again, as long as you don't mess up and throw a lot of planter mix in here, which can rot them in just a few weeks. So keep that compost out of the ground, and you're pretty good. After you plant it now, Brokaw says they like to put on top of their mounds 15 to 35 pounds of gypsum. That's a lot. I mean, here's a 4-pound bag of gypsum. So about 3 or 4 times as much. Put it on the surface. That helps keep the water penetrating better. The calcium is good for preventing root rot, which occurs on orchards quite often. I mean, your chances of getting root rot are not that high. Generally, it's if the tree is not in compost, you're probably not going to get root rot. If you buy it from any other supplier, yes, you probably will get root rot because they're growing in too much compost. Okay, and they do recommend putting a dripper right on this root ball for the first year or so. and then switch to sprinklers. But as long as you get the water in here and into this original root ball, I mean, trees say this big, you know, first summer about a gallon a day. They're not using that much yet. Once a tree is, say, 6 foot by 6 foot in a couple years, it may be needing 10, 12 gallons per day. I mean, fruit trees in general use a lot of water. At about 8 to 10 foot high, you're probably 15 gallons a day, something like that, and you can just maintain it that size. They say a 15-foot avocado about 40 to 50 gallons a day. So, you know, most of the water saved behind dams in California goes into farms. Farms use an awful lot of water. Now, the one thing, it's hard to predict how much your tree will use. You know, on a farm, it's all the same. Every tree is the same. There's nothing around messing the orchard up. So they can predict how much water a tree's going to use. You're going to still have to check it, because if your yard has other trees nearby, if you have a 100-foot eucalyptus tree 50 foot away, that thing's using 100 gallons a day easy, and the roots may come right over to your avocado and suck it dry. Or a 100-foot pine tree somewhere, or, you know, just old shade trees in your yard. You have no idea where the roots are. I mean, if they're anywhere within a couple hundred feet, they'll find where you're watering. So you have to, you know, you have to keep checking your soil to compensate. I mean, at my last house we lived at, we moved into a new tract, and they, at the same time we moved in, they planted these pine trees, and within 10 years, those trees were like 50 foot tall. And that side of my yard, you know, I was watering on my yard the same, and it was just bone dry on one side because of those pine trees. They don't water their greenbelt trees enough, so you have to water them for them to keep your trees alive. So that's one issue with the plants.
So if an avocado tree is getting less than what you just mentioned, what happens?
Generally, they wouldn't, if the tree doesn't have enough water, they wouldn't grow. You get a lot of little brown tips or dry areas inside the leaf.
Looks like it's burnt on the end.
Not necessarily. I would say, well, okay. So acute dryness on a leaf. So if a plant was growing fine and then it suddenly got really dry, you usually get these dry areas that look like this, just come in from the edge, and sometimes it's a burnt area like that, just that pattern. If you have bad roots, you often get where they can't pull up water very well at all times. You get these brown tips going on, or if you have a severe salt burn, you can get severe brown tips too. But often it's just bad roots that cause that, because they just can't pick up the water. But a severe dry, you know, a healthy tree that suddenly got dry would do that pattern. So, fertilizer-wise, when you know, avocado trees, once they're mature and they're growing well and they got a good base of dead leaves underneath them, you know, you want to keep the avocado leaves where they fall. They don't need a lot of fertilizer. But when they're young, you want to get, as you know, this tree here doesn't have good protection yet because there's so much exposed branching on it. You want to get a big ball of leaves, you know, good at least 4 or 5 foot ball of leaves. So fertilize. Here at the nursery, when we grow avocados, we usually use the Osmocote, just because we're in our potting soil, which is totally sterile, and it takes the organics a little while longer to get going. So we'll start them off at least with the Osmocote fertilizer, and you can do this in the ground, it's fine. We like organics better, but you know, it's like, you know, I would say chemical fertilizers to plants are like, say, dessert for people. You know, you can't subsist on them, but they're okay once in a while. It's not the end of the world. So so go ahead and fertilize them now. We like the numbers like on this box, 624. The first number is nitrogen. That's for getting those leaves green and going. The last number is potassium. That's the sap of the plant. This is about the ratio plants are made out of, so that's a good ratio to have. You don't know what's in your ground, just consider your ground that has nothing, because generally plants in nature live on recycled dead leaves, and if you don't have, so you can put a lot of dead leaves from your avocado tree or other trees or other plants in your garden underneath your tree, and those nutrients will get recycled. Again, for a newly planted tree, it may take a month to get going if you want to recycle things, but nature does a pretty good job once once it's settled down, it gets going.
How often would you fertilize?
Well, if you're using something like the organic fertilizers, every 2-3 months is good. This chemical fertilizer says it lasts 6. I would say it probably lasts 5. But just keep them well fed. The problem is homeowners could never know how much fertilizer is available. There's just no way unless you have to take your soil or your plant to the soil and plant lab and get them analyzed to see what's going on. We just have no clue. Yes.
Can you over-fertilize?
With organics, it's very difficult to. With chemicals, yeah, you can just burn it up. Most chemical fertilizers, we've been told, you put down 5 times what the label says, you can burn it. So there is a lot of leeway there. With organics, rarely, because all these are just ground up dead animals and plants, it rarely causes trouble. Unless, it's piled up, say, this high. Again, there's a lot of biological activity going on in here. If it's too deep and it's biologically active, you're gonna prevent the oxygen from getting through to the roots. So, and we always like to throw fertilizer on top of the ground. Nitrogen is the main fertilizer we want, and it's usually lost by leaching through the soil. I mean, some of it turns into ammonia, evaporates in the air, but most of it turns into nitrates and it's leached through, so we'd rather keep it on top so that, if you bury it a foot deep, plant may never get any of it, so.
Do you fertilize it at any age of the tree? What is the age that?
Well, when they're young, you just want to keep them growing. So they can actually put on a new flush of growth every season of the year. So just keep feeding, keep feeding, keep feeding. You can tell if a plant's a little bit light in nitrogen in the leaf if the vein is light. So like this one, the vein's a bit light. Now, on this case, you see all this new growth coming out. What plants normally do is they transfer all their nitrogen from the old leaves to the new growth. So it's probably just taking it out of here. It's getting ready to shed the leaf. A lot of avocados, you get a new set of leaves on, all the older leaves from the last season fall off. Some trees will hold their leaves for the entire year, but we've seen a lot of them where they put on a new set, the old set falls off. They put on another new set, that set falls off. They just keep on transferring the nutrients to the younger foliage and keep on moving along. We'll talk about that next. Okay.
So is
So-
it because it would be a good gist of the sign or whatever, that if there's new leaf growth, even if the rest of the leaves are looking a little sad, then it's probably okay?
Yeah, if you've got new foliage coming out, even if these look really terrible, because in my house right now, my own tree, the leaves are about half brown. Part of that's from the wind we had in December, part of it's because they're getting ready to shed. Part of it's also salt burn, so that's okay. As long as you got, as long as your stems are fairly green like this, not yellowish, not turning black, and you got new growth like this coming out, you're fine. There's a few avocado trees that our grower says they call them deciduous types because every time they're getting ready to put a new set on, they drop all their leaves. They said they're really, really odd. Some of them tend to drop all the leaves right before they put a new set on. So.
Does the municipal water affect the plant in any negative way? Because I know there's a lot of chemicals that we're dealing with.
Well, generally, you get a salt buildup in the ground during the year that we hope the winter rains flush out every winter. So one thing that we'll notice in orchards a lot, especially down in San Diego County, is that when you water a tree, especially if you have the same pattern going on, so if you have this tree in the ground and it's being watered with the sprinkler, like in this area, you tend to get a salt buildup right about here. right at the edge of that because it waters to here and then it dries up, waters to there, dries up. You get a salt buildup in the ground. They say the first rain in the fall, first heavy rain, dissolves the salt from a different direction and it pushes it in. And your tree picks it up and all the leaf tips burn. So they said that's real common in orchards in drier climates, and that the first rainfall we get, all leaves get brown tip. They said sometimes like 15% of the leaf is brown tip. It's just what happens because of all that salt there that was, they water the same, and then suddenly a rain, and from a different area, it picks up that salt. So that's not that big a deal either. So.
Would it work the same on flat ground?
Yeah, you still get a salt buildup in flat ground.
I mean, between rain and hose water or no rain, like you were mentioning about the salt buildup.
It depends where you're watering. I mean, when you irrigate any plant, it's nice to irrigate in the same spot all the time. Like I had some customers say they water here 1 week, and then they'll water over here the next week, and then they'll water over here the next week. They keep moving the hose around or the little sprinkler around, and plants just can't keep up with that. They tend to develop their roots right where the water is all the time. So they say, if you're going to change your irrigation system, change it toward the end of winter when the roots have kind of developed in all areas. And then you can water, say, right here, and the feeder roots will center right there. And you can dig in an area where you're not watering, and you won't find hardly any root at all. So it's better to keep your watering consistent no matter where you put it. Now, they do like most of the soil below the canopy of an avocado tree to be wet, to be irrigated. So they like to use sprinklers on avocados rather than drippers once the tree is larger, so that you can keep more of the area moist. So time of day doesn't matter now. In the old days, they used to keep orchards really clean. They didn't want weeds. They thought the weeds stole the nutrients, stole the water. Nowadays, a lot of orchards are using cover crops in between the trees because as long as you don't mow down the cover crop and throw it away, the nutrients stay there and they don't contribute, generally in an orchard, they don't contribute to moisture loss. It doesn't matter how many plants you have in an orchard. The orchard as a whole is only going to use so much water a day. That's dependent on the climate that day, how hot it is, how much wind is blowing, how dry the air is. That determines how much water the orchard uses, not what plants are there. So the plants don't really use water, they lose it to the air depending on the air that day. So if you have a weed sitting next to your avocado tree, in general, if the weed wasn't there, the avocado tree would use the same amount of water. Your yard would use the same amount of water with the weed not being there or there. It doesn't matter. So when they're young, it matters, but as the orchard matures and your yard is older, it doesn't matter at all if you have plants around it. And we think that having a mixed ecosystem makes the plants healthier. I mean, there's so many articles I'm reading now in orchards and down in Florida where the trees got sick from that greening disease and they're abandoned, and a new farmer buys the property, puts in anticipation of planting something else, he put in a lot of cover crops between the nearly dead citrus trees, and they all revived, and he's now in citrus production. Even though they were ill, the cover crops made them healthy. Kind of weird. So they're experimenting with that a lot in orchards now. So. The other thing you have to be careful with an avocado, especially when they're young, is that they sunburn. Now, we used to buy avocados from the regular retail suppliers. I don't want to mention names, but any other nursery would have them. And we noticed in our nursery back in the 80s, 90s, that their stems would burn. Any stem that the leaf wasn't covering would tend to burn from the sun when it was above 95 degrees. When we started carrying the brocaw trees in the late 90s, we never saw them burn. they're out there on our asphalt, they just didn't burn. So we thought that they were so healthy that they wouldn't burn until 2010. We hit 112 degrees and they burnt. So we go, okay, if you get close to 110 degrees, you've got to, or say over 105, whitewash the broccoli trees or the trees that we grow. And of course, 2 years ago we hit 115. It's like, oh God.
What would you do at home if it gets that hot for extended time? Do you cover the tree, shade it, or?
It didn't help. I mean, 115 degrees, all the new growth is shriveled and turned black. Even though my daughter was standing there hosing it down every hour, you know, when the air's that hot, you can't do anything. All the new growth just fries. The trees grew back really fast. So that whole summer was like 100 degrees, and they love 100. I mean, the burning doesn't usually kill them. Now, broccoli puts this piece of cardboard on here so that if the farmer didn't watch his tree and it burnt up totally, this would protect at least the grafted area so it can regrow from that. So avocado trees, you know, you can cut them down to here and they'll regrow, and as long as the graft is still protected, you still have a good tree. So what we do is if they're saying we're going to go well above 100, you get some whitewash. Now we sell a brand from Ivy Organics that's like the professionals use, iron oxide, limestone, mica, milk, silica. So this is like what the orchards use. Now, you can just go down to the hardware store and buy a little can of latex paint that's light colored, and you'll get fairly similar results. But if you want to use something that's more organic than this one would be. Now this one also has essential oils mixed in it, castor oil, cinnamon oil, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. And what we're finding is that most bugs hate that. So this is kind of a combination sunburn protection and bug repellent, although the sunburn protection will last for a year, the bug repellent only lasts for about a month. So this, this is a can with powder at the bottom, a little vial of the oils in it. You can mix up the whole can at once. It's enough to paint about 5 good-sized trees, not huge trees, but say trees that are around 10 feet. It's enough whitewash in one can to do about 5 trees. If you only have a small tree like this, then just take the greens, put a little paper cup or something mixed up, and you just paint that. So you want to paint what the sun can touch. If the leaves are covering it real well, it does need protection. If the stake's shading that side, no, you don't need that. But whatever the sun can hit, paint that. The leaves tend not to burn. Again, it's well over 110 degrees. The leaves won't burn. So, and if the tree's healthy, you know, what I'm talking about. If you have a tree from another grower, it may burn at 95, and the leaves may burn too.
Now, will it not burn once the tree starts to turn brown as opposed to the green color?
True, when they have the bark on, it's less likely to damage the trunk. And when they're bigger, it's not as big an issue. You got so much foliage there. If you burn off some branches, it's not that big a deal. But I did have a tree that was, say, 10 foot tall and about 7 foot wide, with a branch on it about that thick going horizontal. I didn't whitewash it. It burnt right there, and it broke off right where it burnt. So I think it snapped 2 days after it burned. It just broke right off. So burning does cause damage, but they usually can regrow from that. Now, again, frost damage, generally below, say, 26 degrees, when you really have to worry if they're going to say it's going to get below 26. We haven't seen that for quite a while. Generally, they don't get many bugs. Snails can be a problem occasionally. If you see snails crawl up your tree, you can wrap some copper tape around it. They can't cross the copper. We rarely get too many bugs, except for this one's pretty common. So he brought in a sample of a leaf that's got polka dots all over it. And each polka dot or dot on the leaf is a little colony. It's caused by a little colony of Persea mites. So there's a bug called Persea mite. you can see them with the magnifying glass, but each circle on here is a little, when they're on here anyway. If you look at this, I think they're still on this leaf. So if you get a magnifying glass out or a jeweler's loupe or a microscope, you'll see a little silvery web. And underneath each silvery web is a little colony of spider mites that are sucking on this leaf. Now, when they suck on the leaf, they have to put a toxin in there that liquefies the cells of the leaf, and then they suck it up. That's how spiders eat insects. That's how spider mites eat leaves. Is they pierce the cell, inject a toxin that liquefies it, and they suck it in. Enough of that toxin leaf, the tree just sheds all its leaves, gets rid of the mites that way, but then you're set back a year in production. Now, in most orchards, they don't treat this anymore. So this came into the U.S. in the late 90s. When we saw this in our tree, we hit it with the oil spray, and that cured it in one shot. Didn't come back. So oil sprays do a pretty good job. Neem oil, this is a regular mineral oil. Spray it on there, you got it. But in orchards, what they did, the University of California or somebody, it must have been the University of California, brought in the predator mite that eats this mite. Generally, predator mites walk fast. The bad mites just sit there. So if you see a mite, if you're looking at a microscope, you see a mite crawling real fast, that's a predator mite. They're like lions in the mite world. They eat these mites up. So in orchards, what they'll do, what they normally see is an invasion of the Persea mites in one end of the orchard, followed by the good mites falling up. So they're right behind them going through the orchard, and they keep it clean enough that they don't have to treat it. If they see it getting real bad, they'll pull out the sprayers and put the oil on the trees. But in general now, they have the good mites throughout California that are following the Persea mites. This mite also feeds on camphor tree leaves. So if you have camphor trees that are related to avocados, so if you see this on your camphor tree, that's the same bug.
Usually, I think typically spiders are good for something. What are they trying to fight off by any chance? Or are they just pests?
Yeah, so the good spiders suck on bugs. The bad spider mites suck on plants. They're eating the plant. So they're not good for anything.
So if the predator mite is out of food, what happens to it?
Dies.
It just dies.
Yeah, it follows the invasion around. So every few years you'll get Persea mites running through this area of Orange County with the good mites running. The wind blows them around.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of them that die all over the place, but a few of them will find their way to the next tree.
Do the orchards need to have a shipment of the good ones?
Not anymore. They used to do that. The orchards used to order the little good mites, but now they said they just check for the good mites, and if they're there, they don't treat the trees anymore. So there is a product we also have, Garden Foss. This was one fungicide that the University of California sent letters to all the nurseries back around 1998 or 1999, saying that this was a miracle product for avocado trees. They had trees that only had maybe 10% of their leaves left that were dying of root rot, and they injected this into the trunks of the trees and brought them back to full health. So it can be a miracle in avocado trees. The nice thing about this Garden Foss, it's mono and dipotassium salts of phosphorus acid. A lot of states register this as a fertilizer rather than as a fungicide. So it's mineral nutrients that the plant absorbs that helps it fight off diseases, mainly the phosphorus. You raise the phosphorus content of a plant, which is the middle number on these boxes, on the fertilizer box. Raise that high enough, it helps them fight off diseases quite well. So this product, we don't worry about it poisoning people because it's really just a fertilizer. But in California, it is registered as a fungicide, but it's become a quite important fungicide for us. Not for avocados that much, but for things like basil, impatiens, roses, onions. There's a lot of plants that we're getting downy mildew on now. which is real devastating to a lot of these plants, and this controls that too. So. Okay, so if you don't have any dead leaves to cover your mound, we do carry different kinds of ground up wood and bark that you can cover that mound with. You want to keep the mound covered pretty deeply to prevent evaporation so you don't get the salt buildup. Prevents the weeds from coming if you don't want the weeds. Helps the water absorb a little better. Keeps the ground in the temperature range you want it. So most tropical plants, they want the soil temperature between 60 and 90 degrees, somewhere around there. So if you have bare dirt, it can get well over 100 degrees in that soil mound. So keep it cool.
Does that ever break down, like you were saying earlier, in some sort of a compost type over time if you don't?
Well, everything that you put down that's dead is, you can call it compost. That's fine as long as it's above the soil level, not buried down in the soil. No, everything like this. So in nature and in farms, but in nature, when they've analyzed soil around the world, they said where roots of plants live, 99% mineral. There's a few dead roots running around in the soil, but very, very few. It's like 1% of the soil volume is dead roots. And that's about it. But there's, on general, two in nature, 5 inches of dead leaves on top of the ground. And again, one of my friends went down to Guatemala. He says they dug through 5 foot of dead leaves underneath some avocado trees in the wild. So it can get quite deep without hurting the roots. Okay, so you can put in a mound. I mean, if you have decent soil and you want just to make sure it does better, you can put around it. You can either put our top pot soil around it if you want it to grow a little faster at the very start, or you can make the ground aerate it with some pumice rock right around this area if you want. There's no bad thing about that. It doesn't hold as much water as the natural soil does, but as long as you water it daily when it's warm, you're fine. And then it'll get off to a little quicker start. So generally with roots of plants, the more air and the more water you can get to the roots of the plant, the faster the plant will grow. So oxygen and water are the limiting thing. And now we know on the tops of plants, carbon dioxide and water are the limiting things, the most limiting things on plants. More carbon dioxide they get, the faster they grow. And the farmers are saying, boy, the plants are growing faster these days because we got so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Yes.
My apologies, I might have come a little bit too late, but the airflow, what's that high low? Is there any difference?
Airflow.
As far as like planting it on the bottom or on the top of the hill, that down the air?
Well, it's not the air we're worried about. It's when you plant on a hill, as long as you're near the top, you've got good drainage. If the hill, say, ends right here and then it's level, if it's raining a lot that year, this is the area that stays really wet. All this area right in here stays real wet. The water's coming down the hill and it's collecting right about here. So you don't want to be at the bottom of a hill if you're planting an avocado tree. If you're on a big slope like this, it does help a bit if you want to put a little retaining wall up and get above grade, because the water does go down this way. If you're above grade, the water does not go up in that soil there. So if you're excessively wet, you can always build up a little bit. I mean, at the Great Park, they put their avocado tree in a 2-foot high raised bed, and they have good soil on top of that, and that tree looks absolutely gorgeous there. So. Okay, I think I got any questions on culture. Now, shape of the tree, not that big a deal. I mean, Brokaw Nursery puts about that's a 4-foot stake, and it's about 2.5 foot above the ground. And that's about as high as they expect a tree to be straight. I mean, you look at pictures of their orchards, and a lot of their trees have trunks that come up to about that high, and then they just branch out. So they don't really want them to be straight up. They'd rather have them go more sideways so that they don't get such a tall tree. Now in Japan, they grow avocados in greenhouse. Of course, everything in Japan, fruit especially, is expensive. It's probably $50 for an avocado. But they grow them in greenhouses, and because the greenhouses are low and wide, what they do is they line up a whole bunch of trees in big containers and have 2 branches on each tree and going out. I think it's at a 27 to 30 degree angle out to the sides. And then little branches off of those main branches do all the fruiting. But they want it just like that, so that they never get too tall to pick by hand. So there's different ways you can do it.
I might have missed that quote, but you said $50?
Oh, I don't know what it is. I know you go to Japan, it's like over $100 for a watermelon.
Why doesn't everyone invest this?
If it's growing just straight up, do you recommend topping it so it can branch out or no?
Well, most of the avocados, especially when they're this young, are so limber, you just take the stake off and they just flop over. Now, there is a difference. So if you grow an avocado from a pit, the seedlings just go straight up, just like a Christmas tree. So and truthfully, when you grow them from a pit, they never sunburn because the branches are arranged so perfectly, the sun can't hit anything but leaves. So the baby avocado trees from a seed are, they're just superior to anything we have grafted, because the grafted plants, they take a branch off an old tree, graft it to a seedling, and it's all over the place. It doesn't really want to go straight up and wants to go sideways, probably. So yeah, you don't really have to, if you want it to branch out, you don't have to do a whole lot. They generally do that on their own. So, and again, just have a nice round ball, say 8 by 8 or something like that, you'll get a lot of fruit.
What about strength? Because I had a tree and you helped me through it where the wind level took it out. As it grows, you need to replace that with steel rod. That was put concrete in.
Well, usually in avocado orchards, they have good wind breaks around so the wind doesn't get to them. I have staked up avocado trees and left the stakes on them, say 3 foot high out of the ground, and tie the tree between them just to hold them in place. But a lot of the trees I've grown, I've not needed to ever do it. Even though the wind can make them go like this, they seem to be pretty sturdy. So, especially if you get them from us, they should be pretty sturdy. Now, the other thing we'll talk about real quickly is that most of our avocado trees are like the trees you get elsewhere. They're grafted to a seedling. So this avocado tree, LH stands for Lamhass. This is a Zutano pit. So this company, they have Zutano avocado trees to pollinate the Hass. Since they can't sell the Zutano avocados to any market, they just use the pits to grow. The pits happen to be big, so it's a good seedling pit. And then they grow the tree out for about 5 months or so, cut off the top and graft a little short branch of this Lamhass to it, and then that starts growing. And then after about 4 or 5 months, they sell us these little trees, and then we plant them either in the ground or in bigger pots. So this is a seedling rootstock tree, and the most avocados you buy from anyone else are on seedling rootstock. Now, the other trees we're getting that have these big yellow cardboards on them, these are on clonal roots. So the difference being, most of these seedlings of Zutano make good roots. They're like your children. They're like their parents, but occasionally they get a bad one, just like your kids. You never know. You might get an exceptional one, and you might get a bad one now and then. So when you buy seedling avocados, 1 out of 10 may be a bummer. I mean, it's not made, may not do well because of the genetics of this root. With these trees, every root system on these is a genetic copy, identical copy. So these, for an orchard, instead of having to worry about one out of every 10 to 20 trees, their banks tell them, buy the clonal trees. They cost about 2 or 3 times more, but, well, twice as much because they have to graft them twice. So the way they make these, and the way they find the good roots is they'll go to an old orchard that, say, died of root rot, and if a tree survived it, they take suckers off of that tree, which are the rootstock suckers, and they'll grow them and see how strong they are. So those are called survivor trees. So like, I believe this tree's on Toro Canyon. So Toro Canyon's a ranch down in San Diego County, and they lost most of their avocados in one area to root rot because it was too low, but one of the trees survived, and so they call that rootstock Toro Canyon. So there's a lot of roots that are found that way, in that fashion. They find just a chance genetically superior roots that was growing on a seedling rootstock orchard, save it. Now they call it a certain name, and now they clone it. So they have a tree called Toro Canyon in their field, and they'll grow. They always start with the seedling rootstock. Then they graft a branch of the Toro Canyon tree to that, grow that for several months, put it in a bigger. What they do is right where it's grafted, they'll put a metal ring on the tree so it can't grow beyond this thickness. It'll eventually cut it off right there. So eventually you lose this nurse root. They always like to start with seeds because they've got so much energy in that seed that it helps them grow faster. But they put a metal ring on that so it can't live that long. They put these in a greenhouse that's fairly dark. They call it etiolation, where when plants think they're in the dark, they start getting prepared to grow roots because they think they're underground. So then they put it in a taller container with dirt up to about there and grow it in that greenhouse for a while until this system roots out. This trunk roots out. As this trunk's dying down here because it's got a ring on it, this is rooting out into the soil above it. And then a few months later, they'll graft on the tree on top of that one. So it's grafted twice
Why are they going through all that?
to get genetically identical roots.
And because it's more rot resistant?
May not be, but you don't know with this one. See, this one is a crapshoot.
Okay.
You don't know. It could be superior. It could be worse. It could be better. You just don't know. So they're getting a genetically identical root system on these because they know the Toro Canyon plant. So they at least they know what they're getting. Now, the root system that most orchards want is called DUSA, D-U-S-A. We're not allowed to carry that one. There are certain plants we're not allowed to sell to homeowners. It's like, I don't know why they want to put that restriction on them, but we're not allowed to. For 5 years, we sold DUSA rootstock, and DUSA is probably they're slightly better in rot resistance than Toro Canyon. It makes the plant go into production rather than growth mode. So it makes them produce a little quicker. I mean, it's not a huge deal. What we notice about Toro Canyon is it's very, very vigorous, and the plants look healthier. When I grow them on DUSA, I have some on DUSA, and they always have the burnt tips. It's like they're more sensitive to salt in the water. They just don't seem to be as healthy. But the ones on Toro Canyon, we see them grow 5, 6, 7 foot a year. The first year, they just take off and grow, and the leaves are always nice and green and big. We think they're healthier plants. So we do like Toro Canyon. We also have on this Reed avocado here, this is on another rootstock called Duke 7. And Duke 7 is noted for being highly, highly productive also. Not necessarily small tree, but highly productive tree. So that's another good rootstock. Now, in the last 10 years, the priorities have changed from root rot to drought tolerance. we think Toro Canyon's better than the Deuce or the Duke 7, but they brought in some rootstocks from Israel to test for drought tolerance, because Israel, their problem over there is drought. So the more salt-resistant rootstocks that they're looking for too now. So they're going the other way, looking for, besides root rot, more drought tolerance too.
So the grafting is more of a trying to combine genetics to get a better end product?
Right, so they usually have to start, you can't just take a branch from a tree and try to root it. It's not as easy. It's better to have this nurse seed here to start with on any plant, and then on the clonal rootstocks, genetically superior roots to this are known genetics, at least.
So it'd be like someone who has a weak arm getting a bionic arm? Like in a weird way?
Well, a crippled person getting a better arm.
Okay. So, and a lot of the companies, they don't just grow the plant from seed all the way up to a size like this.
Well, that's a good point. So some nurseries tell homeowners that an avocado tree from a pit will never produce. That's not true. They all produce. So again, it's like your kids. The fruit that a seedling will make will be similar to its parent, but not exactly. So I've grown several trees from seed. The problem with seeds is that they usually have to grow 10, 12 foot before they mature, and it might take 7, 8 years. And then you never know, this tree might be just genetically a light producer, but it'll produce something. And most people find, like I had one gentleman who said he planted 13 pits in his yard and they eat 8 of the trees. So that's greater than 50% at least. They said 5 of them weren't that good. So chance of getting good fruit, like I grew a few and I ate off of both of them. They're okay. They're close to their parent in looks and everything and taste. So maybe not any better, but close. And most of the avocados that are famous were chance seedlings. Like the Hass avocado that you buy at the store, it was a Fuerte orchard, and they planted some pits in the ground from the Fuerte, I guess, and they were trying to graft them over to Fuerte. And there's one plant that wouldn't take the graft. They regrafted it several times. The kids told Mr. Hass to just leave it alone. It looked like a real nice tree and grew the Hass fruit. Their neighbor was Brokaw, and he started growing the trees for them. That was the first tree patent issued, was for the Hass avocado tree. Mr. Hass didn't have, the problem with plant patents, it's up to the person who places the patent to collect or to find the people who break the patent law. But he was kind of a poor farmer anyway. He was actually a postman. And he knew all the other farmers that were propagating his tree illegally. He didn't want to find them. He said they're all poor guys. And so they said over the life of his patent, he only collected about 10 grand. It's like $1 per tree. So he didn't make a whole lot of money off his patent, but it is the most popular avocado grown throughout the world. So millions of trees. The plant patents last 20 years, so you know.
I'm fighting a war. When is it appropriate to graft? I'm hearing early.
We were told by a professional avocado grafter he likes May in Orange County. If you're going to graft your own avocado, May is a good month. I mean, Brokaw grafts everything in a greenhouse, so they can do it any time. It's temperature controlled, but they like the temperatures that May provides, usually between 55 and 85 degrees would be a good time. Right now, the temperature is not bad, but if it gets cold on you, it might get too cold for the graft to take. If it's outside, if it's inside, it doesn't matter. So.
It doesn't matter the age of the plant.
No, you can graft, although, you can graft a little branch into a big stump, but this guy that was grafting in orchards, he liked to cut the trees down, let a sucker come out of the stump, and then graft that. That was his favorite way of regrafting an avocado, but you can graft things into big stumps. That's a whole different class, though, and I don't do grafting. Someone keeps wanting to hire us, and I don't do grafting. My daughter has done a little bit. Okay, the varieties. So there is one other thing. So the average avocado tree in spring or late winter when they bloom usually makes about 1 million flowers a year. The average avocado tree produces about 100 fruit a year. That's only one fruit out of every 10,000 flowers, which is pretty bad. So the University of California, Riverside researchers had theories about it. They said, yeah, they think the problem is avocado flowers are just, the nectar is just too bitter. The bees would rather go someplace else. They said the worst thing an avocado orchard can be placed is next to a citrus orchard because all the bees go to the citrus trees. That nectar is a lot sweeter. So that's been the main problem. That is just that the bees don't like them very much. This one researcher at UC Riverside, and it must have been at the field station here in Irvine, said, I bet you I can do better by hand. So he actually went by hand with a little paintbrush and pollinated as many flowers as he could. You know, out of 1 million flowers, how long does that take? He got 700 fruit on the tree versus 100, which is what the tree normally does with the bees. So apparently it is a bee problem. Some other guy said, oh, you don't have to do that work. Just make the nectar taste better. So what they found is you take a spritzer bottle, 1/4 honey, 3/4 water, spritz the flowers once a week while they're blooming, and they bloom for a month or so, maybe even 2 months, and the bees will not leave that tree alone. And most of our customers who've tried it says it works. And I've tried it, and I'll tell you it works. Because I don't raise bees, and I had a home in Mission Vale a few years ago, 4 avocado trees. By June, we had only a few flowers left. I was looking out there, there's no bees, and there's only 1 fruit forming. So it was a disaster year. I had 10 flowers. I counted 10 flowers left. Got the honey out because we saw the video. Spritzed down the 10 flowers with honey. Out of those last 10 flowers, we got 5 fruit. We're going. That's pretty amazing. You get 1 out of 2 flowers making fruit. So those bees really did a good job once the honey was on there. And the people who shot the videos, and it was 2 separate guys. I mean, the branches look like they're grapes, grape clusters. Just way over production. You know, most of that stuff will fall off. But at least they had it on there to begin with. Now, University of California keeps promoting getting an A-type and a B-type. Most orchard people tell me, don't listen. So the research shows that if you have, now what that means, an A avocado, and most of the good ones are A's, is the flowers on avocado trees, they're pretty small. So this is lambhass. I believe lambhass is also an A-type. So the might be a B-type, actually. It's an A. So that means when the flowers open up, the first thing they do when they open up their female stage. So they open in the morning, and then by the afternoon, the pollen parts of that same flower release pollen. So it's male in the afternoon, female reception in the morning, and that's an A-type avocado. So female morning, male afternoon. A B-type is opposite. It's male, it's female in the afternoon, and then the flower stays on there till the next morning, and it's male the next morning. In theory, if you have an A and a B-type really close together, you can get a little better production of fruit just because they like someone else's pollen a little better than they like their own. So if they pollinate themselves, they'll abort sometimes half of those fruit that they're making with their own pollen. They rarely abort fruit that's pollinated by a different type. So the research we got from University of California, so they did research only on Hass because Hass is the main commercial tree. Out of a block of 9 trees, if you put Zutano in the middle of a bunch of Hass trees, that Zutano will increase production of all these trees around it by 11%. The problem is you took out 12% of your orchard to do that. And Zutano is unsellable commercially. So you didn't do yourself any favors at all. But they keep telling homeowners that. It's like, Okay, well, as long as you like your Zutano avocado, it may help your yard to put a Zutano next to a Hass. And they haven't really checked the other varieties, so we don't know what helps what. But no other country or state, I don't think, does any of this cross. They just use one avocado tree. And what they find is that on a single avocado tree, there's plenty of overlap. You know, the flowers don't all open simultaneously. Some of the, the A types will have females in the afternoon and males in the morning. And again, there's so many flowers on that thing, 1,000,000 flowers, that you're going to get a lot of fruit if you have some good bee activity on it. So so the orchard guys tell me, don't plant that Zutano. You have all this rotten fruit underneath that tree you got to get rid of. And on a good year, when they're all producing well, that's a liability. It's only on some bad years that might actually help you. So, but that A and B type, that thing persists out there. People come and want the B to go with their area. So now they did make some good B types just to fill that. We don't know if they're good pollinators, but they did make a good tasting bee. So we'll go through that too. Any other questions on pollination? Yes.
Question, your spritzing trick, does that work for other fruit trees?
I don't think you need to worry about it. Most fruit trees, yeah, because the avocados have that bitter nectar. Most fruit trees, the bees love them. So now citrus don't need pollination at all, so don't worry about that. They like to be pollinated. So pomegranate, most pomegranate orchards have 2 varieties. They'll get more fruit. It's not a huge number, but they'll get significantly more fruit if they have pollinators, different kinds of pomegranates in the orchard. For most homeowners, 1 tree, you get enough. But if you want the max amount of fruit on pomegranate, make more than 1. Okay. Yes.
So a tree of that size that has flowers starting to come out, would that produce fruit?
It can. We've seen it produce fruit this small. So what we know about fruit production is that the fruit will affect the energy of the branch it's on. So if you had a fruit forming on this branch, no fruit on here, this will grow like there's no fruit on it. So what I tell people, if the tree is this small, like this tree, you got some options. If this makes a lot of fruit, you can switch it out and make this the trunk. Because it's so young, this trunk, this actually is thicker. So you might as well make that the main trunk and make this a side branch. Just let it fall over and be a side branch. So you can do that. Or else just let some of the bottom branches fruit and let the top grow. Because again, 1 fruit on the top of this probably this whole thing here wouldn't grow at all this year. All the energy is going to that 1 big fruit.
How do you make that branch from the
Stake it up. Or tilt it when you plant it. Just stake it up. They're almost like rubber when they're this young. Until they make bark on them, they're real flexible, really flexible.
you cut out some flowers? I mean, you don't want that flowering.
Well, what you can do is you can, unless you have a lot of bees around, you may not get any fruit set on this at all, actually. And with this lamb hast, you probably would get fruit set, so you can just pick it off. Once you see little fruits growing, you can just pick them off if you want that branch to grow.
So even 1 fruit on a branch will cease to grow?
Pretty much, yeah. We see that. We used to grow a lot of citrus trees too, and we used to see there's a fruit on this branch, that branch ain't growing that year until that fruit was off. So we'd always pick off the fruit where we want the growth to occur.
So the amount of fruit on a branch doesn't matter? Like 1 fruit, 10 fruit?
Well, when they're big fruit like on avocados, that's a lot of energy going into that fruit. If they were tiny like kumquats, I don't think it'd be that big a deal. Yeah. Okay, so let's go over the varieties. So we got A and B out of the way. So this list has what's being grown at the field station in Irvine. Julie Frink is the author of this. So they put together their observations over the years in Irvine. Some of these are off what I usually do with my own trees, but generally they got more experience than I do, so they are better now. The interesting plant they don't recognize is our best seller. It's called Carmen. Officially, the name of Carmen is Hass Mendez strain. So Carlos Mendez, back in the 1980s, down in Mexico, found a Hass tree in his orchard that would flower at least 3 times a year. And on top of that, each time it bloomed, it would set fruit. So they started propagating that one. They just call it the Hass Mendez type down in Mexico, and then brought it up. We changed it to Carmen, just shorter, I guess. And down in Mexico, they were getting 27 tons per acre per year. California with the Hass, 7 tons per acre per year. So they figure, Mexico's different. It doesn't have the winter down there. So they figured if they can even double production up to 14 tons per acre per year, they get a lot of money, a lot more money out of their avocados. So Brokaw, they only produce about 300,000 trees of this size every year, but 250,000 of them are Carmen. That's what they're selling, 250,000 Carmen trees since the year 1997. That's a lot of Carmen trees being sold throughout California. So the orchards are planning that, replacing their Hass trees with the Carmen trees. Because if they can, the problem with Hass is that 2 out of 3 years, they don't get a very good crop. 1 out of 3, they get a huge crop, and then the next 2 years, not so good. So they average about 1 good crop out of every. And the reason why that happens is Hass trees bloom February, March, April, on general. February, March, April. If it's raining, the bees aren't out. If it's cold, the bees aren't out. So they get 1 decent year out of every 3 years. The conditions are right for the bees to be out there. It's warm. The trees make a great crop. Carmen, if it doesn't set well on the first bloom, it blooms again in August. If there's any branches with no fruit on them, it blooms again in October. We've seen in our backyard, our Carmen tree bloom every season of the year. If the fruit's not on there, it just keeps blooming until there's fruit on that branch. So those trees load up quite well. They can't outproduce a Hass if the Hass has a good spring crop. But in general, they'll outproduce it over time because Hass has a lot of bad years. So the Carmens are what's selling. The people at the University of California know it's out there, but I'm not sure why they don't put it on their list. It's like, just because it comes from Mexico, I guess, it's not on their list. Because they want to promote Gem. So Gem is their 2nd or 3rd generation. It's their perfect form of Hass. It stands for Gray Edward Martin, the guy who worked like 20 years, 40 years combined research to create Gem. So Gray Edward Martin put his initials on it. So it's the best version of Hass they have, but the orchards still rather buy Carmen because you get 4 chances every year to make fruit. Whereas Gem, you still get the 1 chance a year, but Gem is the best daughter of, or granddaughter or great-granddaughter of Hass that they've come up with. So it's like the perfect Hass versus a Hass that just produces pretty much year-round. Now, on Carmen trees, if you get a Carmen tree, the main crop will still be spring. Because on Hass and all its offspring, the main crop is the spring crop. It blooms in spring or late winter, early spring. The fruit's on there for about a year. Most avocados have a hang time on the tree ripe of about 4 or 5 months. You can pick it, like a Hass tree, you can pick it in February. You leave it on until June. It'll ripen a little quicker the longer it's on the tree, but it'll still be a pretty good quality fruit in February. Carmen, so the main crop on Carmen's at the same time, but you can also get fruit that is ripe in the summer and the fall, just about all the year. Now, if the spring crop on a Carmen's too heavy, that's it. It won't produce flowers and fruit the rest of the year either. So just get one crop. But generally what we're seeing on Carmen, like one of my friends, my farm employees, showed me a picture of his tree. The bottom branch was loaded with fruit. They were about that big. The branch right above it had all these little tiny fruits just forming. It's pretty impressive to see that. So,
Would any certain conditions affect the quality of the fruit or the oil content or the taste or maybe it's the season of different temperatures?
don't know. I haven't read anything on avocados. Most fruit trees, they'll tell you, like on watermelons, they'll say the last 4 days before you pick it, if it's sunny and hot, tastes real good. If it's cloudy, no taste. On apple trees, they say it's the 3 weeks before you pick it. I haven't read anything about avocado. I mean, avocados, it's not the sugar content we're that interested in, which is the most thing that the sun does, but more of the oil content. And they're on there so long. Like with, we'll go over some of the other ones. So I don't know that it's that sensitive to the weather the last few days.
And would the kind of fruit is on the tree be affected or affect the tree? Like, let's say last season, flowered fruit.
Well, versus a summer ripening versus a winter ripening fruit, you'd think if it's on, like on Carmen, since they can produce fruit year-round, you'd think the summer ripening fruit might be a little better quality in winter. I don't know. I haven't noticed any difference, but it's like you get a fruit in the summer, you can't compare it to the fruit you get in the winter because you can't remember that long.
Would the amount of water the tree gets affect the quality of the fruit?
Okay, that's a good question. So, like on citrus, they know the number of fruit on the tree determine the size, and the amount of water you give it determine the size. So the more fruit, the smaller they are. The more water, the bigger they are. So that's what's going to determine the fruit size. So it should apply to just about any crop. Now, interestingly, on Carmen, the season of bloom determines the shape of the fruit. So we know that like on the winter blooming fruits, like Pinkerton blooms in winter, it's got a fruit that looks like this. Reed blooms into summer, the fruit's shaped like this. Has the spring bloom on it, the fruit is shaped like that. So it's like the colder it is, the longer the fruit. So Carmen, they said sometimes you can tell which bloom it is because of the shape of the fruit. This fruit that forms in the summer bloom is rarely round, and the fruit in the spring bloom is more pear-shaped like the rigger has. So it's different shapes at different bloom periods. So it's interesting. Generally, they said they pick Carmen trees by size. Now, one thing you notice about avocados is when they're about ripe, the stem attached to the fruit turns yellow. Right where it's attached, the button turns yellow. So that's one way to tell. I mean, you can pick it way before that, but when it's ready to fall off, it starts turning yellow right here. So that's one way to tell. Of course, if you pick a fruit, if it's ripe enough, it'll ripen within a week. It'll turn soft. If it takes like 2 weeks, it's not really ready yet. So you can pick one and check it. Like I used to pick Hass in winter, and it just was real rubbery. It wouldn't ever soften, so you know that's picked way too early. This is Gilligly. So it's not on the list. Okay, so you got Carmen. We're not allowed to sell gems. We are going to have Gwen. Gwen is the mother of Gem. So Gwen's another Hass offspring, developed in the 1980s. It was the first one that the university got promoted as a dwarf Hass. Heavy producer, good flavor. Trees are kind of weak. That's why they came out with Gem. Daughter of Gwen is Gem. So we'll have some Gwens. They said they're ready to sell in this size, in the liner size. Hopefully within a week or two. We'll see when they have to get a shipping schedule together. So that's Gwen. Lamb Hass is another daughter of Hass, and that's this one. And they're generally highly productive. Small trees, bigger fruit than regular Hass. A little bit lower quality than regular Hass, but still considered excellent, so you'll still like the fruit on them. But they do say that occasionally, if they're picked too early, there's strings in the flesh. So if you get an avocado with strings in the flesh, it was probably from a Hass orchard, or a lamb Hass orchard. So lamb Hass can have a slight defect in the fruit occasionally, but still, people like it. Short tree, highly, highly productive, bigger fruit. Ripens a little bit later than Hass as far as I've seen. Lamb Hass is July through December. That's a lot later than Hass. Hass is February through August, so it's quite a bit later.
Does the side of the seed inside any particular variety have anything to do with anything? I'm just curious. Some seeds I've seen they're just huge.
Right. Every variety has its own seed size. Like reeds are wonderful. They have big seeds. Hasses are nice. They have small seeds. But some other offspring of Hass, there's the Witzel. That one's not even being sold anymore. That was a really, really weak avocado, very sensitive to cold, but it was a B type. So they used Witzel to pollinate Gwen. University of California pollinated Witzel and Gwen together. We lost all our Witzels. So, and then there's Surprise, which is the great-granddaughter of Hass. It is a B type, and it actually is quite good. It's considered excellent. So we do have, this is Surprise. And they all look the same, so I'm not sure why I'm pulling these out. We do have Surprise out there. The friend of mine who has the avocado orchard near Foothill High School has Surprise in their property. We ate them a few weeks ago, and they were quite good. So it's a B-type avocado. So they made that for the farmers who wanted a B-type but wanted something they can actually sell. It may not be a very good pollinator for the A types, but it's, at least they have one now they can say potentially can pollinate their A types. Let's see, I think that's all so all these are sold in the supermarket as Hass trees, or as the commercial avocado, even though they're not, there's only one Hass and everything else is related to it.
They just call them all.
Well, they don't call them anything at the store, do they? They say it's commercial avocado, but it's any one of these. There can be orchards out there of these, and they'll sell them as Hass. The Surprise has the thinnest skin among these. So if you get an avocado store and the skin is kind of thin, it's Surprise. Okay. So that's that group. I will mention Fuerte. We have some Fuertes too. So Fuerte is always considered one of the best avocados ever, and the name means strong. And back in 1900, there was a bad freeze in California, and all the avocado trees froze, but one they called Fuerte. So they started growing that one. So that's got the elongated fruit. It's really, really good tasting. The main problem with it, and the reason why Hass overtook it, is because Fuerte orchards are maybe a third as productive as Hass orchards. So the Fuerte trees, for some reason, they can't figure out why, only 20% of the trees in the orchard are productive. The rest of the trees sit there and do nothing, and they can't figure it out why this is going on when they're grafting from the same tree. So that's the problem. So when I was a kid, my dad had 2 Fuerte trees. One produced, the other one made one fruit one year, and that's it. And we have a lot of customers say they have a super productive Fuerte, and other customers said tree doesn't make anything. So it's a little bit of it's taking a big chance when you have Fuertes, but they are one of the best. Some people say this is their favorite avocado. So. Yes.
I don't think it's subjective, but if you could only grow 2 avocado trees, which one would you?
Well, I've eaten the top 10. Not a whole lot of difference. All really good. Yeah, well, Gilligly may stand out.
Is that one of the only or few avocado trees that shade of color scheme?
No, they turn black, just like half.
Oh, okay.
So the second best-selling avocado tree we sell actually is Reed. It's a daughter of Nabal or Nabal, I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. So these two are closely related. They have big round fruit. Reed is supposedly July through November. When I grew Reed, I would eat the fruit April to June. Way before they said it was ripe, it was so good by that time. Most farmers markets will see these in summer. So what does it say on the list? Yeah, and here they say September to December. So they leave on a tree even longer.
Does that affect the taste?
I don't know. I thought in April they were decent. They were good. By June they were so good I just ate the whole tree. And here they say wait till September. So now the thing about reeds, the first reed tree I ever grew was shaped just like a Christmas tree. I couldn't believe it was really narrow and upright. But lately all the reeds in our customers' houses too, the trees seem to have to search for the center for a while. So we've seen a lot of trees that do this and then they go straight up. So they search a while for the center and then they go up. But they're narrow and upright. It's easy to keep them short, just cut the top off. But that's good fruit. So that's in the top 5 on this sheet also. And Nabal is certainly, we have some people say Nabal's better, some people say it's not as good, but it is a bigger tree. Fruit is bigger in Nabal, up to 30 ounces, almost 2 pounds. And Reed is big, so. But Reed has been our best seller. Reed is, Hass is 95, Hass or Carmen's or all the relatives of half. 90% of the market of the commercial orchards, Reed makes up 10%. Apparently it's being sold a lot at farmers markets and probably restaurants too, because that's a lot of guacamole out of a fruit there. So we heard about Reed originally because a farmer who grew Hass for a living said he grows Reed to eat. He said, okay, if he grows Hass to sell and Reed to eat, it must be awful good. He told us it's like taking Hass and pouring bacon grease on it. So it is quite good. Well, the ones that like the tropical climate best are the West Indian types. So like in Florida, they call them the slim Avocados because the oil content's like 13% versus the Mexican or the Guatemalan types, which are closer to 20%. So, but they grow all kinds in Hawaii too. So. Yeah, there's some really big fruit. Even on their list, MacArthur 25 ounces, Nabal 30 ounces, Queen 34 ounces. So there's some really big ones. We tried to get Queen this year, couldn't get any. 32 ounces. Anaheim's a real big one. They don't sell that one though. So there's some big ones. We're trying to get Helen also, but we couldn't get any of that this year. And we ordered 100 Charwells, and they said they couldn't get them to us also. Yeah, in fact, this is a holiday here. So holiday, according to Julie, is their one they promote to homeowners the most. So it's a small tree, big fruit. Fruit size on holiday, 18 to 30 ounces. Quite good. First time I ate it, it was XX3 back in the 1990s when I ate the fruit out from the field station where they developed it. And I thought it was like sticks of butter. So quite good. So good producer, small tree. It is, well, it's a holiday. So here it says July through November. I've heard Labor Day through New Year's Day is why they call it holiday. So they said it hits the major fall holidays anyway.
Why does it say that it can be hard to grow?
They say it's because up until we started carrying them, it was grown by the other two retail suppliers only. And all their trees die anyway, so the holidays were just dying from that. The fact that they're growing them in ground up wood and sawdust was killing them. Because I tried them from those growers and they were dying. Mine died. So for a while we bought it from that grower and just switched all the dirt to our soil. You know, avocados don't like that at certain stages, so the tops would often just wither on us, but the graft was still there, so they regrew and we sold them after that. So, but the holidays that we grow ourselves, when we get them in the little liners in our soil, we haven't seen any problems. So. Okay, so those are the ones we know the most about. Edronol we have. It's also considered excellent. I don't know Edronol very well, and here it's, what's the B type? 9 to 18 ounces, so it's fairly good size, pear-shaped, March through August. Small tree. And then we have the, we talked about Lambhass. We have the Pinkerton. Now, Pinkerton blooms really early, December, January, February. And unfortunately, I tried growing in the 80s when we had those winters where it was 30 degrees at night. And I couldn't get any fruit on there. I never saw any bees. It was so cold in that decade of the late 80s, early 90s. I just said, oh, Pinkerton, you can't grow it here. Well, now that the winter's a lot warmer, it's a lot easier to grow Pinkerton. And it's got that real long fruit, and it's quite good. So we carry that again.
How about the one here that Nimlioh? You have that out there.
Oh, Nimlioh. I don't know much about that one either. So it's got, it's a B type, 24 to 34 ounce. That's big. Round black fruit, thick pebbly skin. Best overall of the huge avocados, it says. So we'll give that one a shot. The first time we've had that. And then there's the Gilligly, which is this one. The patent on it says that it's a small tree, 10 to 15 foot, pretty good sized fruit. You can see the fruit, really good taste. Can bloom and produce twice a year, March and August, it says. So we ate our first one yesterday, and I would say it's, of course, I don't have a reed to compare it with, but it's really good. This is really good fruit. It's almost like you've added the spices to your guacamole. It's that good. So we're not sure. This may be the best avocado out there now. It was found by Don Gill, so its actual name is Don Gilligly. Whoops, I just put a hole in it. We'll have to cut that open now. In La Jolla, and Rogers Gardens sold it for about 10 years, 20 years? 20 years, I think. I don't know if they're selling anymore. Someone said they're not. But we're selling it now because we're interested in it. Since I put a hole in it, I'll go serve it. Hang on just a second. Excuse me.
You know if it's an A or a B?
I don't recall. It's on the internet though, so you can look it up. There's a nursery up north, Santa Cruz County, that sells it too. Any question on the varieties. I think I covered all of the ones we have.
Probably best for container growing, I think.
Well, I would say any of these avocados are probably about the same size, except maybe, well, yeah, about the same size. If you're like with your Fuerte, it'll stay small and make a lot of fruit too. So apparently the size is more to how much fruit they make than it is on the tree's genetics alone, although that Nabal may be just a naturally big tree.
So when you're putting that in a 24-inch box, which one is that?
It was a reed. Any other questions today?
I have a question. I bought one last year, it's a little bigger than that now, it's doing pretty good, but I got it in a whiskey barrel. I'm not sure when it'll get in the ground, I'll probably leave it. How often, should I be watering that every day? It's in your soil. I don't buy it.
Well, it wouldn't hurt it to water every day. It may not need it. I mean, we like to keep the soil looking quite damp on top, so it wouldn't hurt it though. It's
And
hard.
when it gets hot, even maybe twice a day, when it gets really hot, or just still once a day? Yeah.
Once a day is usually enough, but sometimes if it's 100 degrees, you got to water it twice. Yes.
I planted I bought 2 reeds. I planted one, and this is before I knew enough to put compost in it. I put compost on the bottom of the bowl. And the other one I have in the pot. And when I planted it in the ground, it was looking really yellowy and burnt leaves and stuff. So once it filled the pot, and the grower is all happy. Should I take the dirt out? Is there a way you can take the dirt out and change it out? Or
No, they're kind of sensitive to that, but you might as well, because if you've got compost underneath it, that probably will kill it eventually. So when avocado leaves get yellowish and have brown on the edges, that usually means there's no roots left. So, I mean, you know, if you buy an avocado from anyone else, most of our customers, in my own experiences, you waste about 5 years of your life trying to make it grow. Because if the avocado has no fruit on it, it should be growing 2 to 3 foot a year, and we've seen them do 5 foot when they're real young. If they're not growing that vigorously, then there's something wrong with it. If it, you know, I mean, I remember putting in a 15-gallon avocado from another grower, and I was just having a hard time keeping the leaves on it. The leaves kept falling off, they'd regrow, fall off, regrow. It wasn't getting anywhere at all. After 5 years, you just give up. And we've seen a lot of people buy box-sized avocado trees, $500 for that box, and you know, they said 5 months later it was dead. So you know, unless the grower knows enough about dirt, that tree's going to not be successful. Yes.
I bought one from Home Depot. It was Haas, grafted onto Fuerte. One is A, one is B. What's the objective of the two? I don't get it. I'm new on this.
Well, with Hass and Fuerte, there's probably nothing helpful at all about that because they don't bloom exactly at the same time usually. And the Fuerte may never bloom. You know, being a Fuerte, sometimes they just don't bloom well. You don't need to have the two on there. One tree alone would have been fine, but Fuerte is the chancy one. You never know what you're going to get.
The Fuerte never blooms.
Sometimes Fuertes never bloom, and no one knows why.
A waste of time too.
Yes, they can be a waste of time.
But I see a lot of little flowers coming out.
Well,
of
that's
the
good.
Hass,
Uh-huh.
the grafted side.
Mm-hmm.
After I listened to your advice, I took out all the compost and put in your soil, and now I see them just, really
Good.
shooting up.
Very good. Yes.
What about trimming and cutting a tree to keep it under control? Is there a certain amount that you can and cannot cut off, or maybe do it in a certain season?
Well, usually when they trim avocados for size, they do it in the winter. So in the winter, they're full of energy, ready for that spring flush. If you don't cut it past the last leaf on the branch, there's still a chance to get blooms on that branch that year, but generally you don't get blooms on the branch you just cut. And if you expose a lot of bare wood to the sun when you cut it, then whitewash it.
Oh, I see.
So, yes.
I have a new Fuerte, it's 15 gallons, you got like 10 nice fruit on it. I plan on putting it where I have a Satsuma plum before, will that work?
Sure.
But I got the Satsuma plum and it's fed the neighborhood for 15 years, 2 bags, the purple one.
All right.
And then it had holes in it, the branches, that
Right.
years. I took that one out, now I plan to put the,
Yeah, avocados should do fine. Yeah. Yes.
Well, you mentioned about a Japanese way of extending it sideways. Um, the purpose is to keep the curb the height, right?
Well, their greenhouse was only 8 foot tall, so they couldn't let it go very tall.
But if I want to keep my tree, short, for easy picking, can I do it the same way outdoor?
You can. Now, but the reason they did only 2 branches, so they had this greenhouse, and they lined up these pots, and each tree was doing this, but they just had a whole row of these pots, and each tree was doing the same thing. So they were filling in the whole area with foliage, just with a line of trees. So it was pretty full. It was pretty dense. I mean, you can just grow it, again, in theory, the most productive shape is a dome rather than this. It's a dome. But they're doing this because the greenhouses were wide and they just had one row of trees going down the middle, and then they had them go out 2 directions.
How is their production?
I don't know. I didn't see how much they're producing per acre.
Would that type of splitting it work outdoors?
Be a little more subject to sunburning.
Oh,
Yes.
Can you plant 2 avocado trees in one hole?
Sure, I did that. I put 3. Well, I put 3 in a group, 3 foot apart. Just grew them in. Each tree was on this side and that side.
So 3 feet apart each tree?
Yeah, so I had essentially one big 10-foot wide tree with 3 trees mixed into that one big tree. Yes.
For young trees, do you recommend keeping the branches trimmed to increase the height growth, or do you just let it grow as is? Because I have a reed that's about that tall, but the branches are like my arm length or bigger. And I'm trying to figure out, if it's young, like I don't want a lot of branches on the bottom. I want it to like grow tall a little bit.
I don't know if that would, if you have a branch going sideways, well, I guess I don't know that it's actually stealing any energy anywhere else. If you fertilize and water enough, you can leave that there, and hopefully the tree will put out a branch in the middle somewhere.
Oh, it's like that, but does it just have a bunch of branches coming out of everywhere?
Yeah, I don't think because they're all generating energy and they're not stealing anything unless you don't fertilize enough. So I would just leave them. And those side branches tend to be super productive. The horizontal branches tend to be very productive. Oh, yeah.
I wanted to know about putting avocado in pots. Do you recommend that at all, or is it something to avoid?
Well, we didn't used to because we didn't think they were that heavy a producer, but now since we know how to make them produce heavier, they're fine. We'll say put them in a good size pot. I would go at least whisk half barrel size, so that you get a decent amount of fruit. Because it used to be, avocados are traditionally real light producers, but now we know how to make them produce heavier. So.
Would one variety versus another be better in the pot?
Not that I know of. Just get a known heavy producer, and then you're fine.
Same question, which produces the tasty?
Yeah, we haven't grown all these yet. I mean, there's so many new ones. We've got to try them and see what they do. Yes.
You mentioned that that trees produce best from about 5 by 8. Does that matter what naturally sized tree they are? So if it's a large tree, you still cut them down to that same amount, you still be
Well, it's better to cut them before they get too big. I mean, you don't want to take a big tree and make it small because the root system. Right. So they well, when you keep a tree small, its lifespan's probably not as long as you let it grow big, but it's still probably long enough. So like they say, the forest department told us a long time ago, the bigger the tree can grow, the longer it can live. Once it reaches its limit, it dies pretty quickly because it's trying to find virgin soil for its root system. And once you confine the roots to a small area, then there's too much dead root around this tree. It kills the tree. So when you keep trees smaller, it's going to shorten their life, but I don't know what that, it's probably still longer than we can live. So I don't think it's going to be, in a pot. In pots in general, if you have a big pot, 10 years. 10 years is about it for a perfect tree, and then it goes downhill after that. My father was a bonsai artist, so they knew, they learned what to do with trees in pots. So they said 10 years is max. Some trees you got to redo the soil area even every 2 years if it's a real vigorous grower. So what they would do is every 10 years minimum, they would take the bonsai tree out of the pot, shave off about half the soil, try not to break too many of the roots, put in new soil, trim the tree back so there's no shock from doing that, and then put it back in the same pot for another 10 years. You got to do that to get rid of the dead roots that are piling up. So you can do that in a pot, and you can keep that tree young just by continuously replacing the dirt that way. I mean, if you have a tree in the ground, one of the things that arborists do when they have a tree in the ground that's old and getting real ugly looking because it's too many dead roots around, they will vertically trench around the tree. They'll take the soil out. Say if you have a trunk here and the roots going out like this, they will trench trenches like this around the tree and fill them with new dirt. Gives the roots virgin soil to get into, and it revives the tree for a while. So, you're just creating a new root system, or a healthier root system that way. So in pots, essentially you can do it forever. In theory, you can keep them in a pot for centuries if you keep on rejuvenating the soil.
How much of an extension would the trench give the tree?
Don't know. Enough that the arborist gets paid and the customer's happy, I guess. I mean, they usually do, like 4 inches wide and 2 foot deep. They'll replace.
So how long does would it extend the healthy tree? That's what you don't.
You can probably do it indefinitely. Well, longer than we would live. Put it that way.